That other everyday ingredient doing something to your body nobody told you about? It's sitting in your pantry, wrapped in foil, and it's dark chocolate. Here's what almost nobody knows. A small piece of real dark chocolate can start changing how easily blood moves through your vessels within about 2 hours of eating it. Not a supplement, not a superfood powder. A square of chocolate you probably already have in a drawer somewhere. Think about the last time you ate chocolate. Maybe it was a candy bar from a checkout aisle. Maybe it was a few squares after dinner out of habit. Chocolate gets treated as a guilty pleasure, something you allow yourself, not something your circulatory system is actually responding to the moment it hits your bloodstream. And that's exactly the disconnect worth fixing. There's an entire supplement industry built around something called flavanols, plant compounds sold in capsules with dosage charts, marketed for heart health and blood flow. Most people paying for those capsules have no idea the same compound, in a more complete, naturally occurring form, is sitting in the cacao aisle of a regular grocery store for a fraction of the price. Here's what's actually happening. Cacao beans are naturally rich in compounds called flavanols, specifically ones called epicatechins. When you eat dark chocolate made from minimally processed cacao, those flavanols reach the lining of your blood vessels, the endothelium, and stimulate an enzyme there that produces nitric oxide, the same signaling molecule that tells blood vessels to relax and widen. This isn't a fringe theory. One of the most well-known pieces of evidence for it comes from research on the Cuna people of Panama, who traditionally drink large amounts of unprocessed cacao daily. Researchers from Harvard studying this population found they had remarkably low rates of high blood pressure compared to Cuna, who moved to mainland Panama and switched to a more processed Western-style diet, a difference that lined up closely with how much unprocessed cacao they were still drinking. If that's surprising you the way it surprised me the first time I came across it, take 1 second, hit subscribe. This is exactly the kind of thing about everyday food nobody bothers explaining. Once that nitric oxide signal goes out, the muscle around your blood vessels relaxes and the vessel itself widens, meaning blood moves through with less resistance. Similar to loosening a valve that's been slightly restricted for years without you noticing. Researchers measure this directly using something called flow-mediated dilation, essentially checking how much an artery widens in response to increased blood flow. And multiple studies have found measurable improvement within just a couple of hours of eating flavanol-rich chocolate. Have you ever noticed an afternoon energy dip that a coffee doesn't quite fix? Or hands and feet that always seem to run a little cold? Circulation that's slightly more restricted than it needs to be can quietly show up in ordinary moments like that, long before it's ever something a doctor would flag. Cacao flavanols also appear to have a mild effect on platelets, making them somewhat less likely to clump together unnecessarily. Similar in direction to what happens with onions and garlic, though generally considered a gentler effect than either of those. None of this means chocolate is a treatment for anything, and it definitely doesn't cancel out a candy bar loaded with sugar and milk solids. But it does mean the specific compound your circulatory system actually responds to is sitting in a form you can buy at any grocery store if you know what you're actually looking for on the label. So what do you actually do with this? First, look for dark chocolate that's genuinely high in cacao, 70% or higher, rather than milk chocolate. Milk chocolate isn't just diluted with sugar. The milk protein itself, casein, appears to bind to flavanols in a way that can reduce how well your body absorbs them, so pairing chocolate with a big glass of milk may work against you here too. Second, check the ingredient label for the words processed with alkali or Dutch process. This is a manufacturing step that makes cocoa taste smoother and less bitter, but it also strips out a significant portion of the flavanols in the process. A lot of standard baking cocoa and mass-market chocolate is Dutch processed, specifically because it tastes better, which unfortunately means it's doing less for your blood vessels. Third, a small amount genuinely goes a long way here. Something like 1 or 2 squares, roughly 20 to 30 grams, appears to be enough to trigger a measurable response. Eating a full bar doesn't multiply the benefit. It mostly just adds sugar and calories on top of it. And fourth, if you're eating it specifically for this reason, timing it a couple hours before something like a walk isn't a bad idea, since that's the window where the vasodilation effect tends to show up most clearly in the research. You're not someone who eats a square of dark chocolate just because you're craving something sweet anymore. You're someone who knows there's an actual signal being sent to your blood vessels every time real cacao reaches your bloodstream, and that knowing the difference between real dark chocolate and a candy bar wearing the same wrapper actually matters. And chocolate isn't the last everyday ingredient doing something to your body you were never told about. There's one more sitting in your spice rack right now, and it might be the most surprising one yet.